is from Matthew 22, verses 15 to 22, paying the poll tax to Caesar. Then the Pharisees went out and laid plans to trap him in his words. They sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians. "Teacher," they said, "we know that you're a man of integrity and you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. You aren't swayed by others because you pay no attention to who they are. Tell us then, what is your opinion? Is it right to pay poll tax to Caesar or not?" But Jesus, knowing their evil intent, said, "You hypocrites, why are you trying to trap me? Show me the coin used for paying the tax." They bought him a denarius, and he asked them, "Whose image is this, and whose inscription?" "Caesar's," they replied. Then he said to them, "So give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's." When they heard this, they were amazed. So they left him and went away. Amen.
Hello. Due to certain technical issues yesterday morning in church, we were unable to record the sermon by Rev John Prior, who was preaching at Christ Church yesterday morning. So that we can provide something, I'm going to read out the script of his sermon, and I hope you find it helpful. I said these are the words of the Reverend John Prior, and his sermon is titled "Speaking Truth to Power," based on Matthew chapter 22, verses 15 to 22. Speaking truth to power is a non-violent political tactic employed by dissidents against the received wisdom or propaganda of governments that they regard as oppressive or authoritarian. The phrase originated with a pamphlet, "Speak Truth to Power," a Quaker search for an alternative to violence published by the American Service Committee in 1955. Practitioners who have campaigned for a more just and truthful world who include Václav Havel, Czech Republic, Nelson Mandela, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Gandhi, the Dalai Lama, and Elie Wiesel, a Jew. And this seems a suitable title for Jesus' encounter with the leaders of his day. Roman provinces fell into classes. Those who were peaceful and required no troops were governed by the Senate and ruled by proconsuls. Those which were trouble centres and required troops were the direct sphere of the emperor and were governed by procurators. Southern Palestine fell naturally into the second category, and tribute was in fact paid by the emperor. The act of the first governor, Cyrenius, was to take a census of the country in order that he might make proper provision for fair taxation and general administration. The calmer section of the people accepted this as an inevitable necessity, but one Judas, the Galileite, raised violent opposition. He thundered that taxation was no better than an introduction to slavery. He called on the people to rise and said that God would favour them only if they resorted to all the violence they could muster. He took the high ground that for Jews, God was the only ruler. The Romans dealt with Judas with their customary efficiency, but his battle cry never died out. "No tribute to the Romans" became a rallying cry of the more fanatical Jewish patriots. The actual taxes imposed were three: a ground tax, which consisted of 1/10 of all the grain and 1/5 of the wine and fruit produced. This was paid partly in kind and partly money. An income tax, which amounted to 1% of a man's income. A poll tax, which was levied on all men from 14 to 65 and all women from 12 to 65. This poll tax was 1 denarius, 1 day's wages. It was a tax which everyone had to pay simply for the privilege of existing. The approach of the Pharisees and Herodians was very subtle. They began with flattery. That flattery was designed to do two things. It was designed to disarm the suspicion that Jesus might have had, and to make it impossible for him to avoid giving an answer without losing his reputation completely. The seriousness of the attack was shown by the fact that the Pharisees and the Herodians combined to make it. For normally, those two parties were in bitter opposition. The Pharisees were the supremely orthodox, who resented the payment of the tax to a foreign king as an infringement of the divine right of God. The Herodians were the party of Herod, king of Galilee, who owned his power to the Romans. The Pharisees and Herodians were strange bedfellows indeed. Their difference were, for the moment, forgotten in a common hatred of Jesus and a common desire to eliminate him. Jesus said, "Show me a denarius." He asked whose image was on it. The image would be that of Tiberius, the reigning emperor. All the emperors were called Caesar. Around the coin there would be the title which declared that this was the coin of Tiberius Caesar, divine Augustus, son of Augustus. The high priest of the Roman nation in the ancient days, coinage was a sign of kingship. As soon as a king came to the throne, he struck his own coinage, and that coinage was held to be the property of the king whose image it bore. "Well then," Jesus said, "give it back to Caesar. It is his. Give to Caesar what belongs to him, and give to God what belongs to God." There is a sphere of life that belongs to God and not to Caesar. On the whole, the New Testament lays down three great principles to the individual Christian and the state. The state is ordained by God. Without the laws of the state, life would be chaos. People cannot live together unless they agree to obey the laws of living together. Without the state, there are many valuable resources no one could enjoy. Their own water supply, their own sewage system, their own transport system, etc. The state is the origin of many of the things which make life livable. Secondly, no one can accept all the benefits which a state gives them and then opt out of all the responsibilities. It is beyond question that the Roman government brought to the ancient world a sense of security. It never had before. For the most part, except in certain notorious areas, the seas were cleared of pirates and the roads of brigands. Civil wars were changed for peace and tyranny, for Roman impartial justice. As someone wrote, it was a glory of the Roman Empire It was a glory of the Roman Empire that it brought peace to a troubled world. Under its sway, the regions of Asia Minor and the East enjoyed tranquility and security to an extent for a length of time unknown before and probably since. This was the Pax Romana, Roman peace, which lasted from 27 BC to 180 AD. People under Roman sway found themselves in a position to conduct their business, send letters, make journeys in security, thanks to the strong hand of Rome. This had proved to be a great benefit to the early church in spreading the gospel. And thirdly, human beings have God's image on them. God created mankind in his own image, as it says in Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 and 27. Therefore, it remains true in the life of the Christian that God has the last word and not the state. The voice of the conscience is louder than the voice of man-made laws. The Christian is at once the servant and the conscience of the state. This month is the 50th anniversary of a movement which some of you may remember, entitled the nationwide Festival of Light. This was a short-lived grassroots movement formed by British Christians concerned about the rise of the permissive society and social changes in English society by the late 1960s, opposed to growing trends in the mass media for the explicit depiction of sexual and violent themes. Its culmination was a pair of mass rallies in Trafalgar Square and Hyde Park in September 1971. The catalyst was as a result of a young couple, Peter and Janet Hill, who had returned from 4 years of missionary work in India and were appalled by the low moral culture they were witnessing. They were supported by, among others, Mary Whitehouse, Malcolm Muggeridge, Lord Longford, Trevor Huddleston, Cliff Richard, and Dora O'Brien. On September 23, 1971, bonfires were lit on hills around the country. I remember being at one with a crowd of people on Cribden Hill in Rawtenstall. After a few years, the movement evolved into the organisation Christian Action, Research and Education, known as CARE. This organisation, as the literature says, for more than 35 years, CARE has been a voice for truth in the public square. Our mission is to bring a uniquely Christian insight to the policies and laws that affect our lives. We believe in a better story for our society and culture, one where the life of every human being, from conception to natural end, is respected and upheld. They do it by equipping individuals and a local church for prayer and action. They do it by impacting the political world, training Christian graduates to the CARE leadership programme, and supporting the vulnerable through advocacy. CARE produced a prayer guide centering on a different theme for each week, with a short prayer every day. Recently, this email came from CARE, which was really encouraging news. It said, "I want to share with you a really encouraging update. Remember that an extreme abortion amendment, which intended to legalise abortion up to birth, was tabled to the Police, Crime, Sentencing and Courts Bill. Tonight, after being selected by the Speaker for debate and a vote, the amendment was withdrawn. That was thanks to numerous MPs who powerfully spoke against it, who CARE was privileged to help brief ahead of its debate. We praise God that this extreme amendment has not been passed. MPs have told us about the high volume of emails and letters they received from constituents. They really made a difference. Had the amendment been passed, it would have opened the door to sex-selective abortion and abortion on demand, for any reason, up to birth. In England, Wales and Scotland, there was a general 24-week time limit to have an abortion. However, termination of pregnancies can be permitted up until birth if there is a substantial risk that if the child were born, it would suffer from such physical or mental abnormalities to be seriously handicapped, a caveat that includes Down syndrome. Several people are challenging law in the High Court after a woman with the condition brought a case claiming that it stereotypes and demeans people and is incomplete with the European Convention on Human Rights and is therefore discriminatory. Jason Koppel QC, represented the claimants, told Lord Justice Singh and Mrs. Justice Leven that the law perpetuates and reinforces negative cultural stereotypes to the detriment of people with disabilities. Heidi Crowther, 26, from Coventry, is among those bringing legal action against the Department of Health and Social Care in the hope of removing a section of the 1967 Abortion Act, which she claims is offensive and doesn't respect my life. The government says the case should be dismissed on the grounds that there is no evidence of a connection between the law and discrimination against those with Down syndrome, but that it does not constitute negative stereotyping. However, this case is decided. It's interesting that if you inadvertently mid-gender somebody and they are offended, you can have a couple of police officers knocking on your door. And then there was an open doors appeal on behalf of Christians in India. On Thursday, July the 1st, 39 MPs attended a briefing on the new Open Doors report, Destructive Lies. This report demonstrates how India's Christians are facing systemic systematic attack fueled by anti-Christian propaganda. Open Doors said this is an amazing turnabout, thanks to all those who email their MPs. This report is a powerful and shocking read detailing the persecution of Christians and other minority faith groups. The Apostle Thomas was reputed to be the first follower of Jesus to bring the gospel to what we now call India. For nearly 2,000 years, the church has been shaping culture and contributing to a positive sense of national identity in this diverse and colourful land. What is particularly concerning is that India would pride itself on being the largest democracy in the world, giving freedom of religion and the right to express and if wish change their faith without let of hindrance, according to the United Nations Charter. Open Doors are seeking to build momentum from this briefing and put pressure on the UK government to take action. They are wanting Nigel Adams MP, the Minister for Asia, to read the report and stand up for India's Christians. And then they're saving Brazilian rainforests and their indigenous people. Indigenous tribes in Brazil have been peacefully coexisting with nature for hundreds of years, but their way of life is under serious threat. Forests around them are being destroyed to make way for farming or mineral exploration. We in the Creation is a movement in Brazil that seeks to explain the biblical responsibility we have to care for creation, and supported by Tear Fund, Josias, the leader of the movement among young people, have also been selected to be part of Tear Fund's World Rebooted campaign, which urges governments to prioritise protecting the environment and the poorest communities as they rebuild societies after the coronavirus pandemic. We have a personal interest in Tear Fund's work, having supported them from the earliest days, and at present having two of our sons involved in their headquarters work. I say that's John Prior, that's John Prior's sons. Yesterday's paper had a letter from the Brazilian bishops of the Amazon, who are outraged at proposals in a bill being considered by the Brazilian Congress and the legal loophole on which they are based, which threaten all life in the Brazilian Amazon. If proposed legal changes are approved, indigenous lands would be opened up to mining, agribusiness, ranching and dam construction, effectively ending the rights of indigenous people granted by the Brazilian Constitution. The bill is an enormous threat to their territories, forests, rivers and ways of life. If passed, neither indigenous communities nor the Amazon rainforest will still exist in a decade. Nearly 40 British food businesses have already threatened to stop sourcing products from Brazil over the proposed reforms. Britain's hosting of the UN Climate Change Conference COP26 later this year is an opportunity to show its leadership in defending indigenous rights and support those fighting against deforestation and climate change. Now is the time to act to protect indigenous peoples and our common home before it is too late. Speaking the truth to power is a mission to bring uniquely Christian insight to the policies and laws that affect our nation. May we be part of that with God's help.